I have been thinking about this for 20 years. What we're about to do. This is a case study, actually. This is putting together a vendor, manufacturer, and a CEO, and telling you about the problem that they solved. And so the reason I wanted to do this, all the way back when I was a VC, 20 years ago in Kendall Square, early stage, was because startups and vendors, startups and big companies always have this gap in communication, as you all know. So I wanted to give case studies of how people figured out how to communicate, what were the terms of the deal, and what was the problem that they solved, and going from laboratory to scale. So I was sitting with Rick when he introduced himself, Rick and Brian, and I said, hold on a second here. This is big, because Shreya had told me that she had a square centimeter of membrane during her PhD studies, and they took it to the 100 million times more. So I said, how'd you do it? Will you come and talk to everybody? So that's the idea here. You guys all mic'd up?
We're going to take your hand.
Okay, good. There you go.
No, I actually don't have a slide.
Okay. Do you want to start? I can't remember how we're going to do this. Ron, I thought you were going to moderate.
Well, but you guys got at least
At the
tell me
end.
a quick story.
Okay, maybe introduce yourself. How's that?
Okay, I'm Brian Paul, Director of Sales with Verico Technology, and we're one of the roll-to-roll partners that will be referenced here. Background in roll-to-roll products at 3M, everything from magnetic tape and other obsolete things to Post-it notes and Scotch tape and sandpaper that will probably always be discreetly manufactured roll-to-roll. So yeah, happy to be here today.
Great. Rick?
I think Shreya gave a better introduction to her than I will, but I met Shreya early on in her adventure when she was still a graduate student, and she's going to give you a little bit of background on some of the way that this thing got scaled up very quickly.
So I do have a couple slides. I will use them here. So as Rana said, when we left the lab at MIT, we had a square centimeter of material that worked most of the time. It was a research project. It was a science project, though I took personal offense if anyone called it a science project, because in my mind, it was a product. But over the last 8 years, we have productized it, we have scaled it up, and we have delivered something that can reliably produce value for our customers. And that is a pretty foundational change in how you think about the development of a technology, as you all know, in collaboration with partners like Rick and Brian, who found it really important to be able to do it at the pace that we did it. So when we were raising our series seed here in 2017, I met an investor. His name is Abe. He did not invest in us. And the reason was because he said, how are you going to manufacture that? And I said, right here on my roadmap in 2020, I'm going to figure out how to manufacture this, of course. But first I have to do all these other things. And he said, yeah, but that's a really big problem. And we've seen a lot of companies stumble at that manufacturing. So we closed that round in July. In August, I spent the month talking. I kind of did an I-Corps, what I called an I-Corps for manufacturing. And we talked to about 30 or 40 different manufacturers, processes that already exist, to figure out how our technology could overlap and intersect with what they did. And the most important thing we learned was that we needed to have not a solvent-based chemistry, but an aqueous-based chemistry. There weren't enough solvent manufacturers out there, and they were too expensive to meet our unit economics. So we had to really early on switch the direction of the product, not the market, but how we made the product in order to be compatible with existing manufacturing capacity. It was in that phase that I met Rick, and he helped us find those companies, the individuals in those companies. He showed up to the meetings, the early meetings, to indicate, a bunch of different things, but help us guide those discussions, provided a lot of credibility to two kids right out of MIT, didn't know what we were doing at the time. And we went from something that was produced batch to something that was produced roll to roll in a sort of a narrow increment to something that was produced roll to roll at 40 inches wide. And now when we process, what do we do? About 30 feet a minute, something like that, which means that we can produce enough membrane for international paper for a year in about 2 or 3 days. And so it's going to be a long time before we ever need to own that asset. Maybe we will never own that asset, but it certainly doesn't make sense today. And so we leverage the assets, the know-how, the trade secrets, the optical inline equipment, all of those that have already been developed because we don't need to reinvent that wheel. I feel like I should offer Q&A, but I don't think that's supposed to be. Yeah, okay, great. Yeah.
How was the IP addressed?
How's intellectual property addressed?
Yeah.
Yeah. So
How much of Rick must have stolen amazing amounts of IP from?
would you like to answer this question?
So, just to back up a little bit, while this sounds like a miracle how to scale this thing up this quickly, there are lots of technologies in the photographic industry, the drug processing industry, the medical device industry that are based on roll-to-roll. And making a membrane, be it a filtration membrane like this or an electrochemical membrane, and you've seen some of those today, is possible using chemistry and rheology of fluids developed in another industry. So it's not a be-all and end-all manufacturing process, but there are those of us that love it because it goes across so many industries. So to make a long story short, I spun out the major coating asset at Polaroid many years ago and created a contract manufacturer. Going to Rana's question on IP, we served a lot of people in a lot of different industries, including some direct competitors. IP protection was never really an issue because a contract manufacturer wants to be on your side. They don't want to go in your business. They understand how to firewall IP between customers that are very similar, and they're good at it. And they understand the need for somebody to build a patent portfolio. They're interested only in serving, only in helping make the product. So it's actually a fairly simple thing.
Okay, so you didn't steal her IP. All right, how about money? So did you raise that A round before you could hire the contract manufacturer, Shreya, or was that before your A round?
It was before our A, it was after our seed. At the time, we were two people who both were working at MIT. Brent was a postdoc, I was teaching. And we were working on this nights and weekends and all the times we had around that time. So raising our seed was important for it being a sustainable business for us and for growing it, but it also allowed us to hire a chemist because neither of us are chemists, and that was really important because for you to go from solvent-based chemistry to aqueous-based chemistry, you have to do chemistry. And so we raised that round. We learned a lot about the manufacturing, so we didn't kind of go too far down the development process and then have to go orthogonal. We went orthogonal pretty quickly, which actually meant that our process was pretty different from the intellectual property we had filed when we were at MIT pretty quickly, which I think in hindsight makes a lot of sense because we weren't designing a product at the time, we were doing research. And once you're working backwards from product specifications, things can change. But it does mean that we own exclusively all of our own intellectual property. And when we work with someone like Verico, we own everything about the formulation and they retain everything about the process. And we are incentivized to work together because we need both halves of the coin. And many of those IP around the process is not patentable because it's very hard to defend manufacturing patents without going into other people's manufacturing facilities, which they obviously don't like you to do. And as a result, we just keep it really clean. Trade secrets, patents, two different things. We don't get in each other's business.
So the trade secret stayed here in
Yep.
the contract, but the patents, you must have filed new patents with the fact you went over to aqueous, right?
Yep.
Okay, so how expensive was this? Did you have to pay in bulk sum or over time? How did that go?
Oh, well, I don't know if I'm the right person to ask that. Our CTO handles most of our IP portfolio.
Okay.
We work with a law firm. We work with Cooley to
No,
file our
I meant
intellectual property.
the contract manufacturing.
Over time.
Okay.
We did a couple of joint development agreements with a couple of different partners with the goal of working together long term. Some worked out, some didn't. That is how it goes across our manufacturing value chain. But at the end of the day, we are renting time and experience on assets from knowledgeable people whose business it is to deliver roll-to-roll coding.
So if I were to just say, what were the terms of the deal? How would you answer that simple question for entrepreneurs in the world, in the room, who want to just understand what were the terms? Without numbers, how would you describe it?
I would say I can talk about that.
Well, it was a
Sorry.
fee for service.
Yeah, that's true. Correct.
Okay. I
Yes.
mean, that's what they need to
Yep.
understand.
Yep.
This was a fee for service over time. You had a contract.
Correct.
Okay. That's what I wanted to get to.
Yep.
That's all right. Thanks. Where was this all happening? Did you have to travel back and forth? Was it time consuming to do the contract manufacturing, or did you leave it in their hands and they reported back to you?
We did both. We were doing this in 2020. So there were times where we were on Zoom working with our contract manufacturers because we didn't want to give them COVID. They didn't want to, we were trying to abide by. We also did hop around states, as different states had different regulations, and we needed to keep moving because we had burn. We needed to sustain. But typically our team, the couple of folks who are really kind of focused on this process, do go for the coding runs and are present because it helps troubleshoot, helps us learn for the next time, and helps us retain the kind of the feedback loop for how we can change formulations going forward. I think it's also worth mentioning that we don't only work with roll-to-roll coding partners, we also work with chemistry and formulation partners. So we own the recipe, we patent the recipe, and then we work with contract, basically chemistry shops who do this at scale. We can do in-house up to about 120 liters, but anything larger than that, 500, 1,000 liters, we outsource. We don't do that ourselves. And then we also do not assemble the modules ourselves because that's a solved problem. The reverse osmosis water industry already knows how to do that. And so although it is the largest part of our lead time, if this was mapped as lead time, this last part is our largest part of our lead time, we're building on the shoulders of giants who already know what they're doing here.
Thank you all very much. I just wanted to try something different that I hope some, at least, of the entrepreneurs in the room found valuable to understand how to get this done and go from a square centimeter to 100 million times that. Thank you very much.
This work was really led by my co-founder and his team. I must acknowledge that.
All right, it's time to go back out, and thank you.